The restaurant was never truly quiet, but on that evening, it felt softer than usual. The lights were warm, the air carried the gentle smell of food and coffee, and a low hum of conversations floated from table to table. People laughed, plates clinked, and waiters moved quickly between guests. It was the kind of place where people came to relax, forget their worries, and enjoy a simple moment. Among the staff was a young waitress who had been working there for a few months. She moved quietly, almost unnoticed, as if she didn't want to disturb the space around her. She was careful with every step, polite with every customer, and always kept her voice low. Most people didn't remember her face after they left, but she didn't seem to mind. In fact, it felt like she preferred it that way. She carried plates with steady hands and never made mistakes. Even when the restaurant was busy, she stayed calm. Some of the other workers joked and talked loudly, but she mostly stayed silent. When someone spoke to her, she answered kindly, but never said more than needed. There was something about her that felt distant, like she was always somewhere else in her thoughts. At the far corner of the restaurant stood an old piano. It had been there for years, more as decoration than anything else. Sometimes, on special nights, someone would play a few simple melodies, but most of the time it just sat there, quiet and forgotten. A few customers would glance at it and smile, but no one paid it much attention anymore. That evening, a group of well-dressed guests entered the restaurant. Their presence was loud even before they sat down. They spoke with confidence, laughed loudly, and seemed to enjoy being the center of attention. As they took their seats, the atmosphere around them shifted slightly. Some people looked over, curious about their energy. The young waitress was assigned to their table. She approached them with the same calm expression she always had. She greeted them politely and began taking their order. The guests spoke quickly, barely giving her time to respond. Still, she remained patient, writing everything down carefully. As the night went on, the group grew louder. They ordered more food, more drinks, and their laughter filled the room. At one point, one of them noticed the piano in the corner. He pointed toward it with a grin. "Does anyone even play that thing?" he asked, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Another guest laughed. "Probably just for show." Their attention turned toward the staff. "Hey!" one of them called out, looking directly at the waitress. "Can you play?" The question caught her off guard. For a brief second, her expression changed, but she quickly hid it. She shook her head lightly. "No," she said softly. "I don't play." But the group wasn't satisfied. They saw it as a moment of entertainment. "Come on," one of them insisted. "Just a simple tune. Nothing hard." Others at the table joined in, encouraging her, some with playful smiles, others with a tone that felt more like a challenge. A few nearby customers began to watch, sensing something unusual was happening. She stood there, holding her tray tightly. Her heart began to beat a little faster. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and this situation made her uncomfortable. She tried to smile politely. "I really can't," she said again, her voice still calm but slightly more tense. But they didn't let it go. "It's just for fun," one of them said. "We're not asking for anything big. Just press a few keys." Their laughter followed, but it didn't feel warm. It felt like pressure. The restaurant staff began to notice. One of the other waiters glanced over, unsure if he should step in. But the situation didn't seem serious enough to interrupt. The manager, busy at the front, didn't see what was happening. The young waitress stood frozen for a moment. She looked around the room. Some people were watching quietly, others pretending not to notice but still listening. The piano in the corner suddenly felt much closer than before. She took a small breath. "All right," she said quietly. The group cheered, as if they had just won something. One of them gestured toward the piano. "Go on," he said with a smile. She placed her tray on a nearby table and began to walk toward the corner. Each step felt heavier than the last. The sounds of the restaurant faded slightly in her ears. Her focus narrowed, and everything around her felt distant. As she approached the piano, something inside her shifted. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if remembering something. Her eyes rested on the keys, and for a brief moment, Her calm expression changed into something deeper, something filled with memory. But she quickly controlled it. To everyone else, she was just a waitress about to press a few random notes. No one expected anything more. She pulled out the bench slowly and sat down. The room didn't go silent, but it became quieter. Conversations lowered, and more people began to watch. The group that had asked her to play leaned back in their chairs, smiling, waiting for a bit of entertainment. She placed her hands on her lap for a moment. Then, slowly, she lifted them and hovered them over the keys. There was a pause. A long, quiet pause. It was as if time had slowed down just for a second. Her fingers lowered gently onto the piano. The first note hadn't even been played yet, but something about the moment felt different. And in that quiet space, with everyone watching and waiting, she finally pressed the first key. As her fingers touched the keys, a wave of memories came rushing back. She had not played a piano in years, not since the day she had walked away from everything she knew about music. For a moment, her heart beat faster, and a shadow of fear crossed her mind. Could she still play? Could she remember the notes, the rhythm, the feeling? The restaurant around her faded, replaced by a flood of images from her past. She remembered long afternoons sitting at a grand piano in a sunlit room, fingers flying across the keys while her teacher watched, guiding her with patience and firm hands. The lessons had been intense, sometimes exhausting, but they had shaped her. She had loved the music then, loved the way it could carry her to another world, away from worries and fear. She had felt powerful, alive, in a way she could not describe. But life had changed. Something had happened that made her step away from music. She had promised herself she would never return, that the piano was behind her. Yet here she was, back in front of it, her fingers trembling slightly above the keys. She was not just nervous. She was confronting a past she had tried to leave behind. The first few notes were soft, simple, almost hesitant. The guests had asked for something basic, and she began with a melody that fit their expectation. The sound was gentle, almost shy, but it carried a hidden depth. Her hands moved carefully at first, testing the memory of her skills, feeling the keys beneath her fingertips. It was like meeting an old friend she had not seen in years. As she played, she began to notice the room changing. The group that had asked her to play leaned forward slightly, curious. Some people who had been eating or chatting now stopped to listen. Even the staff glanced over, sensing that something unusual was happening. The music started to draw attention without her meaning to. Slowly, her fingers gained confidence. The melody that had started as simple began to stretch, evolving into something more expressive. She remembered how to add the little touches that made a performance feel alive. The slight pause here, the soft accent there. It was like breathing life into the notes. Each sound seemed to echo not only in the room but in her own heart. Her past had trained her for this moment. She had studied countless hours, learning to express emotion through music, to tell a story without words. Now, even though she had left that world behind, the training returned instinctively. Her fingers danced across the keys with a grace she had thought lost. The simple tune she had started with began to grow into a more complicated, richer piece, full of emotion and power. The guests' smiles faded slightly, replaced with surprise. They had expected a simple performance, a few notes for entertainment. Instead, they were hearing something beautiful, something unexpected. The melody pulled at something deep within them, stirring feelings they hadn't anticipated. They glanced at each other, unsure of what to say, their playful teasing now replaced with silent awe. She did not notice them. Her mind was fully immersed in the music. She felt every note, every chord, every vibration beneath her fingers. She remembered how music could speak when words could not, how it could make people feel joy, sorrow, wonder, and even hope, all at once. That was what she was giving them now. Not a simple tune, but a piece of herself, her hidden world laid bare through sound. The restaurant seemed to pause. Conversations faded completely, replaced by the soft echo of the piano. Even the clatter of dishes and the footsteps of waiters disappeared into the background. For those minutes, everyone in the room existed only in the music, connected by a thread of sound that she wove from the keys. Her body relaxed as she played, and with each passing moment, she felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had hidden this talent for so long, thinking she had no need for it anymore. But now, faced with the possibility of being seen, she realized that the music was still a part of her. It had not left. It had only been waiting silent for the right moment to return. The melody began to swell. She added subtle harmonies, her hands moving with precision, yet there was an emotional rawness that made it human, real. She was telling a story with every note, a story of quiet strength, hidden talent, and long-suppressed dreams. Her heart beat in time with the music, each rhythm echoing her own life experiences. Some customers' eyes began to glisten. They tried to maintain composure, but the depth of feeling in her playing was difficult to ignore. The group who had asked for a basic tune shifted uncomfortably, realizing that what they had thought would be a small joke had turned into a profound experience. Their laughter and teasing now felt distant, inappropriate, as if they had entered a room of reverence without knowing it. She did not stop. She could have paused, finished quickly, and returned to her role as a waitress. But something inside her told her to keep going, to give everything she had, to let this hidden part of herself speak. Each chord carried her memories, her struggles, her unspoken emotions. She played not for recognition, not for praise, but because it was what she needed to do, what she had to do. The music grew stronger, more confident. She leaned into the keys, her body moving with the rhythm, her face calm but focused. She had control, yet there was freedom, too. A balance she had learned over years of practice. It was the first time in a long time that she felt truly alive, fully present in a moment that was hers and hers alone. The room around her seemed to respond. People stopped what they were doing entirely. Phones were put away. Chairs creaked softly as heads tilted slightly forward. Everyone who had been distracted, indifferent, or casual suddenly became attentive. The sound of her piano was not just music. It was a presence, a force that captured attention effortlessly. The group that had initially demanded a simple tune was now silent, unsure how to react. Their eyes widened as they watched her hands glide over the keys with skill and grace they had not expected. They had come to see entertainment, but instead, they were witnessing artistry. Something beyond their understanding had taken place in the corner of the restaurant. She felt a small smile tug at her lips as she noticed their surprise. Not that she needed their approval, but it was a quiet acknowledgement that the years she had spent hidden away had not been wasted. She had the ability, and tonight it was no longer hidden. She had reclaimed it in a single, unbroken flow of music. Every note she played carried a piece of her story, even if no one in the room knew the details. The joy, the struggle, the moments of doubt and triumph. They all flowed through her hands and into the keys. She realized that music was not something you could forget, even if you walked away from it for years. It remained inside, waiting for the moment it could be shared again. By the time she finished the initial section, the room was completely quiet. There was a pause, a stillness that seemed almost sacred. People blinked, slowly realizing what they had just experienced. The simple tune they had requested had become something far greater, an expression of human emotion, raw and real. She did not look up immediately. She let the final notes linger, letting the room absorb the sound. Then slowly, she raised her gaze. Her eyes met those of the guests, and she saw the mix of shock, admiration, and something that looked like humility. They had expected simplicity, and instead, she had given them depth. The moment was delicate, fragile, yet powerful. She had stepped into the spotlight, even if only for a few minutes, and allowed herself to be seen. Not just as a waitress, but as someone who had hidden extraordinary talent beneath a quiet exterior. And in that pause, as the last notes faded, the young woman realized something important. That talent, even when hidden, never truly disappears. It waits, patient, for the right time to emerge. And sometimes, all it takes is a small moment, a gentle nudge, to bring it back to life. After the first few notes, a shift began to happen in the restaurant. What had started as a simple request transformed into a performance that no one could ignore. The young woman's fingers moved over the keys with a confidence that seemed almost magical. The melody, once soft and basic, now carried layers of emotion. It had rhythm, flow, and a sense of story that drew everyone in. People who had been chatting quietly turned their heads. Even the staff paused in their work, plates and trays in hand, watching silently. The music had a presence, an invisible thread connecting everyone in the room. No one had expected this. No one could have guessed that a quiet waitress held such a gift within her. She played with ease, yet there was an intensity in her eyes that showed the depth of her focus. She was not just pressing keys. She was telling a story. Each note seemed to have meaning beyond the sound itself, conveying feelings of longing, hope, and strength. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, and it was clear that every movement had purpose. The group of guests who had requested the tune initially were now captivated. They had intended it as a joke, a playful challenge, but now they were silent, unsure how to react. Their eyes followed her hands, moving across the keys with precision and grace. There was no hint of arrogance in her expression, no sign that she played to impress them. She played for herself, and somehow, that sincerity touched everyone around her. Some customers wiped tears from their eyes. The music had reached them in a way words never could. It was more than sound. It was emotion, memory, and human connection. The simple tune had become an unforgettable experience, and the young woman held the room completely in her hands. The notes began to flow faster now, yet they were never rushed. She controlled the pace perfectly, allowing each melody to breathe, each chord to resonate. Her fingers danced with a mixture of lightness and strength. There was a clarity in her playing that spoke of years of hidden practice, of talent refined and polished, yet kept secret until now. She could feel the energy in the room shifting. People leaned forward, silent, as if drawn into another world. The restaurant, normally filled with the ordinary sounds of daily life, now felt like a theater. Every person present was part of something rare and extraordinary, and they sensed it. Even the waiters, who had seen her every day, now looked at her with awe, realizing that she had a side of herself no one had ever glimpsed before. As the music built, she added small variations to the melody, subtle shifts that transformed the simple tune into something entirely new. She remembered techniques from years of training, flourishes that made the piece unique. It was as if she was speaking directly to the listeners, inviting them to feel what she felt, to see the world through the lens of her experience. The group of guests tried to hide their amazement, but their eyes betrayed them. They had expected something light and playful, a brief performance to fill a moment. Instead, they were witnessing talent, emotion, and dedication that they could not have anticipated. The quiet waitress before them was no longer just serving food. She was commanding attention and respect with every note. She did not notice the effect she had on others. Her focus remained entirely on the piano, on the flow of music through her fingers and into the room. It was a private experience shared with everyone present. Each chord was deliberate yet effortless. Each pause and accent conveyed meaning without words. She had forgotten, for a moment, the fear and hesitation she had felt when first approaching the piano. All that remained was the music, pure and alive. The melody shifted again, moving into a higher range. The notes were brighter now, filled with light and energy. She smiled faintly as her fingers moved faster, creating a rhythm that was both captivating and soothing. The audience felt the change, a sense of movement, of story unfolding. The simple tune they had requested had evolved into a journey, and they were passengers along for the ride. She added depth by incorporating chords that echoed through the restaurant. Each chord created a resonance that could be felt in the chest, a vibration that connected everyone to the music physically as well as emotionally. People leaned into the sound, closing their eyes briefly to absorb the experience. Even the hum of conversation from nearby tables had disappeared. Nothing existed outside of the music. The young woman's performance was not perfect in the mechanical sense, but it was perfect in expression. The slight imperfections, the human touches, made it real. It was not a performance created for fame or approval. It was an outpouring of talent that had waited too long to be shared. Her story, her life, her emotions were being expressed through each key she pressed. She noticed a few people shifting in their seats, moved visibly by the music. Some dabbed at their eyes, others smiled softly, a sign that the music had reached them in a way ordinary conversation could not. It was a rare connection, a moment where human emotions were communicated without language, understood by everyone who listened. Time seemed to blur. What had begun as a few minutes of a simple tune extended into something much longer, though it did not feel prolonged. The audience lost track of time, caught in the flow of the music. Each note built on the last, each section evolving naturally. She guided them through highs and lows, tension and release, in a way that felt effortless yet intentional. The guests who had requested the tune were now leaning forward in their chairs, fully immersed. Their playful smiles had vanished, replaced by wide-eyed wonder. They whispered to each other quietly, but even their whispers seemed to blend into the music, becoming part of the experience rather than interrupting it. They had been spectators expecting entertainment, but now they were witnesses to something extraordinary. She continued to play, feeling the story unfolding under her fingers. She was no longer the quiet waitress hiding in the background. She was a storyteller using her piano as a voice. The keys allowed her to communicate emotions she had long held inside, and in return, the audience responded with attention and understanding. It was a shared human experience, rare and powerful. The restaurant staff watched silently, realizing that they were part of something special. They had known her as someone gentle, quiet, and hardworking. Now, they saw her in a new light, as someone with hidden depth and extraordinary skill. There was a sense of pride, admiration, and even disbelief. The young woman they had passed in the hallway every day had revealed a talent that few could match. As she approached the middle of the piece, the music took on a slower, more reflective tone. It was softer, quieter, yet full of emotion. She drew the audience in closer, each note a gentle pull at their hearts. It was a moment of intimacy, a shared understanding without words. They could feel her past, her struggles, and her triumphs, all expressed through the sound of the piano. The group of guests looked at each other, almost unsure of how to respond. Their laughter had faded completely, replaced by reverence. They had come expecting something lighthearted, but they were witnessing talent, emotion, and human expression in its purest form. For them, the evening had transformed into an unforgettable experience, one that would stay with them long after the music ended. She did not play for them. She played for herself, for the music, and for the story she had carried quietly for so long. Yet, in doing so, she had given everyone present something far greater than entertainment. She had created a connection, a memory, and a moment that could not be forgotten. Her fingers moved with purpose, yet with freedom. She allowed the music to flow naturally, improvising slightly where her heart guided her. Each note, each chord was deliberate, but it was the expression behind them that captivated the audience. They could sense her intention, her emotion, her humanity. As the final section approached, the music began to rise again. The notes grew stronger, more confident, carrying a sense of triumph and release. She could feel the energy in the room, the way the audience was responding, though she did not need it. She played because it was time, because the music demanded it, and because she was ready to embrace it again. By the time the last chord rang out, the room was silent for a moment, suspended in awe. Everyone realized they had been part of something rare and remarkable. The simple tune that had been requested had become a performance full of depth, emotion, and artistry. It was not just music. It was a human experience, a shared moment of wonder, and a revelation of hidden talent. She lifted her hands from the keys slowly, letting the echo fade naturally. She exhaled quietly, her heart still racing, her mind filled with the feeling of accomplishment and release. The room held its breath, then slowly began to respond, the first soft claps emerging and growing into louder, heartfelt applause. People were standing, cheering, moved by what they had just witnessed. The young woman allowed herself a small smile. She had stepped into the spotlight, not for recognition, not for praise, but because the music inside her demanded to be heard. And in sharing it, she had touched everyone present, creating a moment that none of them would ever forget. The applause echoed through the restaurant, a sound so unexpected and overwhelming that it seemed to shake the walls slightly. People were standing now, some with tears glistening in their eyes, others with wide smiles that could not hide their amazement. The group of guests who had asked for a simple tune looked at each other in stunned silence, their previous teasing long forgotten. They had come for a joke, for a small moment of entertainment, but they had been swept into something far greater. She sat there, hands still resting lightly on the keys, feeling a mixture of relief and disbelief herself. The world around her seemed almost unreal. The restaurant, once filled with ordinary noise and movement, now held a stillness, a reverence for what had just happened. People were not just clapping. They were expressing gratitude for having witnessed a rare talent come to life. Her heart beat rapidly, but this time it was not fear. It was exhilaration, a deep, joyful pulse that reminded her of why she had loved music in the first place. It had been too long since she had allowed herself to play freely, without hesitation or worry about judgment. Tonight, she had shared a part of herself that had been hidden, and the response was more than she could have imagined. Some of the other staff approached cautiously, unsure how to react. They had known her as quiet, gentle, and hardworking, never imagining that she possessed such extraordinary skill. Their expressions shifted from surprise to admiration. One of them, usually brash and loud, whispered softly, almost to himself, "I never knew she could do that." The statement seemed to capture the feeling in the room. The guests who had challenged her now leaned forward, faces a mix of awe and humility. They had underestimated her, assuming she was simply an unassuming waitress with no special abilities. Now they understood they had witnessed something remarkable. Their playful tone had vanished, replaced with a silent respect for the woman who had transformed a simple request into a breathtaking performance. She allowed the applause to continue, her breathing steady but her mind racing. She thought of the years she had spent away from music, the promise she had made to herself to never return. And yet, in this moment it all seemed irrelevant. The music was not about promises or fear. It was about expression, about sharing something true and alive. And for the first time in years, she felt completely present. A few customers approached her, hesitant at first, unsure if they should speak. Their words were simple but heartfelt. "That was incredible," one said quietly. "I've never heard anything like it." Another nodded. "You have a gift. Thank you for sharing it." She smiled gently, acknowledging their praise without speaking too much. Words felt unnecessary. The music had already said everything that needed to be said. She thought back to the first notes she had played, how tentative and careful they had been. She had worried whether her fingers remembered the movement, whether the music still lived inside her. Now every doubt seemed distant, almost meaningless. She was no longer hesitant. She was confident, not just in her ability, but in her right to play, to express, to share what had been a secret for so long. As the room settled slightly, she noticed the music producer at the back, quietly observing. He had been drawn in like everyone else, but there was a sharpness in his gaze, a recognition that went beyond admiration. He saw potential, something rare and marketable, a talent that could reach far beyond this small restaurant. Yet, even as he recognized it, he remained respectful, not wanting to disturb the fragile beauty of the moment. She took a deep breath and stood slowly, stepping away from the piano. The moment of silence that followed was almost tangible, a pause for the audience to reflect, to absorb what they had just experienced. The music had ended, but its impact lingered, leaving a sense of awe and wonder that would not fade quickly. The guests who had requested the simple tune now approached, their expressions mixed with apology and admiration. "We didn't expect that," one said, his voice sincere. "It was beyond words." She nodded politely, allowing the acknowledgement without speaking too much. She was not seeking praise, but it was impossible not to feel a quiet pride. Her secret talent, Her hidden story had been recognized, even if just for a moment. Her thoughts drifted to the past, to the reasons she had walked away from music. It had been a painful choice, one driven by circumstance and fear. Yet, sitting at the piano tonight, she realized that stepping back had not diminished her ability. If anything, it had strengthened it, made the expression more personal, more human. The music she played was now filled with experience, with life, and that depth was something no one could teach. The atmosphere in the restaurant remained charged, a subtle energy that lingered after the applause had faded. People spoke quietly to each other, sharing glances and murmurs of admiration. Some were moved to tears, others to reflection, each touched in their own way. Music, she realized, was not just about sound. It was about connection, and tonight, it had connected everyone in the room. The piano, once a forgotten piece of furniture, now seemed alive. It had been a bridge between her past and present, between hidden talent and public recognition. Every note she had played was not just music. It was a statement, a reclaiming of something deeply personal. She had brought it back to life, and in doing so, had reminded everyone present of the power of human expression. The producer approached her cautiously, his presence noticeable but not intrusive. He spoke softly, careful not to break the spell of the moment. "You have extraordinary talent," he said. "Have you considered performing more? Perhaps professionally?" She looked at him, eyes calm but thoughtful. She had never expected this, never sought it. Yet the idea stirred something inside her. The thought of sharing her music more widely was both exciting and terrifying. She stepped away from the piano, her mind racing with possibilities. The room had witnessed a transformation, a quiet woman revealing the depth of her talent. She felt a sense of freedom she had not known in years, a liberation from self-imposed limitations. The music had given her courage, and now she had to decide what to do with it. The applause had subsided, replaced by quiet chatter as people resumed their meals and conversations, though the atmosphere remained changed. Everyone present had been touched by something rare, a performance that had started with a simple request and grown into an unforgettable experience. It was a reminder that extraordinary moments can happen in the most ordinary places, and that hidden talent, once revealed, can leave a lasting impact. As she returned to her duties, she moved with a new confidence. Her steps were lighter, her demeanor more assured. The piano had not just been an instrument tonight. It had been a teacher, a guide, a bridge to something she had thought lost. She realized that talent, passion, and expression are not bound by time or circumstance. They wait patiently, ready to emerge when the moment is right. The guests who had requested the tune remained seated, quietly observing, still in awe. They had expected a joke, a moment of light amusement, but they had received a gift far greater, a glimpse into the soul of a hidden artist. They would leave the restaurant remembering not just the music, but the transformation they had witnessed, the quiet power of someone stepping into their truth. She smiled faintly, a mixture of humility and quiet satisfaction. The night had started as ordinary, but it had become extraordinary. She had shared a part of herself that was deeply personal, and in doing so, had touched others in ways she could never have predicted. The experience was more than applause or recognition. It was connection, understanding, and the human response to beauty. The restaurant slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of the performance lingered. Conversations were quieter, smiles more reflective, and the air seemed to carry a subtle reverence. The young woman had changed something that night, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been present. She had reminded them that talent, when genuine, speaks for itself, and that human expression has the power to transform ordinary moments into unforgettable experiences. As she finished her shift, she glanced once more at the piano, now silent and still. She knew that this was not the end. The experience had awakened something inside her, a desire to play, to share, and to embrace the music she had once abandoned. She walked out into the night with a sense of possibility, knowing that her journey with music was far from over, and that the world had only seen the beginning of what she could offer. The night continued, But the energy in the restaurant had changed completely. People spoke in low voices, still carrying the feeling of what they had just experienced. Some customers lingered, unwilling to leave, as if they needed to let the music settle in their minds. Others exchanged quiet comments, their faces glowing with the surprise of witnessing something extraordinary. The young woman returned to her duties, yet she moved differently now. There was a calm strength in her steps, a quiet confidence that had not been there before. She smiled at customers with warmth, yet her mind kept drifting back to the piano, to the music that had flowed through her so effortlessly. It was not just talent. It was a part of her life she had thought was gone, now returning stronger than ever. The group of guests who had requested the tune initially remained seated, speaking softly among themselves. Their playful teasing had disappeared, replaced by a mix of awe and respect. One of them finally spoke up, voice hushed but sincere. "We were wrong. We thought it would be a simple performance, but that was something else entirely." The others nodded in agreement, realizing they had underestimated the quiet waitress who had become the center of attention. The music producer, who had been quietly observing, approached her cautiously. He did not want to disrupt the moment, but he knew an opportunity was present. "You have an incredible gift," he said, his voice respectful and measured. "Have you considered taking this further? Sharing your music with more people?" She looked at him thoughtfully, unsure of how to respond. The offer was tempting, yet it carried weight. Performing professionally was a big step, one she had avoided for years. Yet the idea sparked something inside her, a curiosity, a possibility she had not felt in a long time. She had thought that the piano was behind her, that her music was a memory, a talent tucked away in a hidden corner of her life. But tonight, she realized it was still alive, waiting for a moment to be expressed again. The experience had awakened something she could not ignore. Her music had touched people, and in return, it had given her a sense of freedom and confidence she had not felt in years. The restaurant staff watched her quietly, exchanging looks of admiration. They had known her as a kind, gentle presence, someone who worked hard without complaint. Now, they saw another side of her. An artist, a storyteller through music, someone capable of transforming a simple space into a place of emotion and connection. The impact of her performance lingered in the air, and even those who had not fully understood it felt moved by her presence. She reflected on the audience's reaction. People had responded not just to the skill of her playing, but to the authenticity, the honesty behind it. Music was more than notes. It was emotion, memory, and experience expressed in sound. Her past struggles, her hidden life, and her long-suppressed dreams had all contributed to the depth of what she had shared. And now, those same people recognized it, even if they could not fully articulate why it had affected them so deeply. A few customers approached, their faces hesitant but sincere. "That was unforgettable," one said softly. "Thank you for sharing your talent." Another nodded. "It was more than music. It felt like you were telling a story only we could hear." She smiled politely, letting their words settle, appreciating the recognition without needing to explain herself. The music had spoken for her, and that was enough. She thought about the years she had spent away from music, the reasons she had left, and the fear that had held her back. It was clear now that talent, when genuine, does not fade. It waits, patient and persistent, until the right moment arrives. And tonight that moment had come. The experience had reminded her of who she truly was, and what she was capable of, if only she allowed herself to embrace it. The producer lingered nearby, observing quietly. He did not want to pressure her, but he could not ignore the opportunity in front of him. "Your talent is rare," he said again, this time with a hint of insistence, yet still respectful. "You could inspire so many people. You could share your music with a wider audience. Are you willing to consider it?" She took a deep breath, considering the offer. It was a path she had never imagined taking again, yet the idea felt exciting, almost natural. It was as if the music had led her here, opening doors she had long thought closed. As the night wore on, the restaurant began to empty slowly. The lingering energy of her performance remained, a quiet hum of admiration and wonder. She continued her work, but her mind drifted to the piano, to the flow of music and the connection she had felt with every person in the room. It was more than just notes. It was a bridge, a shared experience that went beyond ordinary conversation or gestures. Music had allowed her to communicate in a way words could not. The guests finally left, each with a sense of having witnessed something rare. They had come for amusement, for a moment of light-hearted fun, but they departed carrying a memory of beauty, emotion, and human connection. The young woman had not just played music. She had created an experience, and it left a mark on everyone who had been present. She paused for a moment, looking at the piano as the last of the customers departed. The instrument, once quiet and forgotten, now seemed alive with possibility. She realized that her journey with music was not over. The experience had reignited a passion she had thought lost, and the possibilities stretched ahead like an open path. She could choose to remain silent, or she could share her gift with the world once more. Her thoughts turned to the challenges ahead. Performing professionally would not be easy. It would require courage, dedication, and the willingness to step into a world she had avoided for years. But tonight had proven something important. She had the talent, the resilience, and the authenticity to make it work. And perhaps most importantly, she had discovered that her music could touch others in ways she had never imagined. The restaurant was quiet now, the hum of activity replaced by stillness. She took a final look around, appreciating the small space where something extraordinary had occurred. The piano had not just been an instrument. It had been a catalyst, a reminder of her strength, her talent, and the power of human expression. The night had transformed her, if only slightly, opening the door to possibilities she had never considered. She left the restaurant that night with a sense of hope and determination. The applause, the admiration, and the emotional impact of her performance lingered in her mind. She knew that she had been given a chance to reclaim a part of herself, and she intended to take it seriously. Music was no longer something hidden or distant. It was alive within her, ready to be expressed, shared, and celebrated. As she walked into the night, she felt lighter, freer, and more connected to her own identity than she had in years. The journey ahead would not be simple, but it was filled with possibility. She had discovered that hidden talent, when allowed to shine, can create moments that touch hearts, transform spaces, and leave a lasting impact on everyone who witnesses it. Tonight was just the beginning, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. The following days felt like a dream. The young woman returned to the restaurant, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Customers who had heard her play approached with smiles, compliments, and quiet admiration. Even new visitors seemed to have heard of her performance, as whispers of her talent traveled fast. The music she had played, once hidden and personal, was now becoming known, and she could feel the ripple it had created. Her heart raced at the thought of returning to the piano, but this time, it was different. There was no fear, no hesitation, only anticipation. She realized that she had been given a gift, not just of talent, but of confidence and purpose. The piano, once silent and distant, now called to her in a way she could not ignore. She wanted to play, to explore, to share more of the music that lived inside her. The producer had followed up, asking if she was ready to take a step forward. He was patient, understanding that talent needed nurturing and choice. He did not push, he only offered guidance. She considered his words carefully, weighing the possibilities. The idea of performing beyond the restaurant, of taking her music to larger audiences, was both thrilling and intimidating. Yet, deep inside, she knew this was her moment to embrace. One evening, after her shift, she sat down at the piano alone. The restaurant was quiet, the day's customers gone. Her fingers hovered above the keys, memories of her recent performance flooding back. She began to play, softly at first, then with more confidence, allowing herself to experiment, to explore new melodies. The music felt alive, as if it had been waiting for this moment, eager to be expressed. As she played, she thought of the people who had heard her, the smiles, the awe, the quiet tears. Music was not just sound. It was connection, communication, and emotion. She realized that her talent had the power to move people, to touch them in ways words never could. Each note carried intention. Each chord carried meaning. She was no longer playing for herself alone. She was playing for anyone who would listen, anyone willing to feel. Word of her performance continued to spread. People came from nearby towns, curious to witness the quiet waitress who had stunned a restaurant with a simple tune turned masterpiece. She welcomed them, but each time she played, she focused on the music itself, letting it speak for her. The attention, the admiration, and even the whispers of fame did not change her. She had learned that the essence of music was in authenticity, in sharing a true part of oneself. The producer introduced her to opportunities she had never imagined. Private performances, small recitals, even local events where she could showcase her skill. Each invitation was a chance to grow, to explore the breadth of her talent. She approached them cautiously at first, unsure of how to balance her life, her responsibilities, and this sudden emergence of recognition. But with each performance, her confidence grew. She learned to trust herself, to let the music flow naturally, without overthinking or forcing perfection. Her days became a blend of work at the restaurant and evenings dedicated to music. She practiced more intentionally, discovering nuances in her playing she had never explored before. The piano, once a relic of the past, became a constant companion. She experimented with classical pieces, improvisations, and even compositions of her own creation. Each session was a journey, a chance to explore her own creativity and voice. Her performances began to draw attention not just for technical skill, but for emotional depth. People came not to judge or critique, but to feel, to experience something extraordinary in the ordinary setting of the restaurant or small recital halls. They left changed, inspired, touched by the beauty of what she shared. She realized that music was more than an art form. It was a gift that connected humans on a level deeper than language. As her reputation grew, so did her self-awareness. She learned to navigate the balance between recognition and humility. She was not performing for fame or wealth. She was performing because it was part of her, a way to communicate what could not be said with words alone. Each audience reminded her that her talent mattered, that it could bring joy, reflection, and emotion into the lives of others. She also discovered a new sense of freedom in embracing her music publicly. For years, she had hidden her gift, fearing judgment, failure, or misunderstanding. Now, with each performance, she felt liberated. The music no longer belonged only to her. It belonged to everyone who would listen, everyone who needed it. And yet, it remained deeply personal, a reflection of her life, her experiences, and her emotions. Even in quiet moments, when the restaurant was empty, she would sit at the piano, exploring melodies that felt like secret messages to herself. Each note carried memories, hopes, and a sense of release. Playing had become not just an activity, but a form of meditation, a way to process her feelings, and a reminder of her journey from hesitation to courage. The people who had once asked for a simple tune now became her supporters and fans. They marveled at her ability, often bringing friends and family to witness her performances. Each time, she greeted them with a smile, letting the music speak more than words ever could. She noticed that people began to change subtly after hearing her, carrying a sense of peace or inspiration long after they left. Her life shifted in ways she had never anticipated. Music became a bridge, connecting her past and present, her hidden talent and newfound confidence, and most importantly, connecting her to the people around her. She understood that talent is not just about skill but about courage, authenticity, and the willingness to share oneself fully. Months passed, and she became a local sensation, known not for theatrics or showmanship, but for the honesty and depth of her music. Her reputation reached farther, drawing the attention of larger venues and organizations interested in her performances. Each invitation was approached thoughtfully, but she remained grounded, remembering the quiet beginnings in the small restaurant where it all started. Her journey was not without challenges. Performing in front of larger audiences brought nerves, self-doubt, and the pressure to meet expectations. Yet, she found that the more she embraced the music as an expression of herself, the more natural it became. She learned to trust the process, to allow the emotion to guide her fingers, and to let the audience experience the music authentically. She also inspired others in ways she had not expected. Young musicians who had given up on their dreams sought her advice, drawn by her story of rediscovery and courage. She shared her experiences openly, encouraging them to embrace their talent, to practice with dedication, and to never let fear silence their gifts. Her influence extended beyond the notes she played. It became a message of hope and perseverance. As she reflected on her journey, she realized that the simple request that had sparked it all was more significant than she had imagined. Being asked to play a basic tune led to the rediscovery of her passion, the reclamation of her talent, and the transformation of her life. It reminded her that sometimes, the smallest moments can have the most profound impact, leading to unexpected opportunities and personal growth. Eventually, she performed at larger events, each one met with appreciation and awe. Her reputation grew steadily, but she remained true to herself, never allowing fame or expectation to change the essence of her music. She knew that the beauty of her talent lay in its authenticity, its emotional depth, and its ability to connect with others on a human level. Through all this, she maintained her presence at the restaurant, the place where it all began. It was a reminder of her roots, her humble beginnings, and the journey that had brought her to this point. She played not for attention, not for accolades, but for the joy of expression, for the power of music to transform, and for the connection it created with every listener. The story of the quiet waitress who had turned a simple request into an unforgettable piano performance spread far and wide. She became a symbol of hidden talent, of courage, and of the human capacity to rediscover oneself. Her journey inspired countless people to look within, to embrace their passions, and to share their gifts with the world. She knew that the music was hers to keep, yet it was also hers to share. Every performance, every note, every melody became a bridge between her heart and the hearts of others. And in that shared space, she found fulfillment, purpose, and a sense of connection that had been missing for too long. Looking back, she realized that the simplest request had changed her life forever. It had opened doors, revealed hidden strengths, and allowed her to embrace the full scope of her talent. The journey had been unexpected, challenging, and deeply rewarding. And as she continued to play, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, sharing her music, touching hearts, and living a life that was both extraordinary and deeply human.